And now,
Thank you.
a conversation on next steps on global trade with U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai.
Good to see you. Ambassador, we're running through a lot of topics today, and as you know, trade has been one of my favorite topics for decades.
Good.
I just want to start saying, how do America's approach to trade questions, broadly, and I mean by all dimensions, those who may believe in, manic free trade versus those who have concern, how has that orientation shifted? And how are you putting a proactive trade agenda forward, and what equities do you care about?
Great question. It's a big question. So I think it's a mix of things that have always been American, and then there's also elements of new. And you'll see what I mean when I say, in terms of our approach to trade today, it is about pushing innovation. Now, there is the innovative aspects of our economy. We're still, I think, the envy of the world in terms of the innovation that our economy is able to push out and to foster. But frankly, in today's world, whether it's in trade policy or more broadly in economic policy, we see the need for innovation in our policies, in our policy making, in the policy conversation. And I think a lot of that is brought about by the fact that if you look at the last 20, 30, 40, 70-year time horizon,
Right.
and you look at the state of our economy today and the world economy today, and I was tracking the conversation you had with Secretary Pritzker and Hunts, you see around you an incredibly dynamic but also volatile world economy. Dynamics that we can't entirely explain. There's fear and anxiety that comes with that, right? But I think that there's also an incredible opportunity, because what we are seeing through, let's take a shorter time horizon, the last 3 to 5 to 7 years, is increasing recognition that the trade policies in particular, that have been long-standing pillars of the way that we engage with the rest of the world, the way that we have advanced economic policy ourselves, is demonstrating some of its limits in terms of its outcomes. So here I'm going to come to our guiding principles in terms of the equities that we're carrying and what we're looking for in terms of innovation. We're not just looking for new approaches for the sake of new approaches. We're looking for new approaches to help us navigate a very challenging economic time period right now, and seizing the opportunity to try to set ourselves up for a more positive set of better outcomes from our trade policies, working in tandem with our other economic policies and, of course, our foreign policies. So you hear us talk a lot about promoting not just trade for the sake of trade. We're not just trying to have more trade for its own sake. We're trying to figure out how to use the levers of trade, dialing pieces up, dialing them down, looking for new tools to promote higher goals, in our view,
So you're
of
promoting
resilience, sustainability, and inclusiveness. And that these are 3 things that we know in our current economy that we are lacking.
So this is, maybe I'm getting the framing wrong, but part of the vernacular in the trade area, this is a managed trade approach.
I don't know how you get managed trade from resilience,
Okay.
sustainability, and inclusiveness, right? So you look at, and we heard some questions you asked at the end of the last session around globalization.
Right.
We have a version of globalization right now. There's always been some version of globalization, but this current one has run into significant limits with respect to sustainability. And I think what's really interesting is I hear these themes not just in my interactions with civil society, stakeholders from that segment of our economy, but also the CEOs, many of them represented in your audience today, looking at the challenges that we have with respect to resilience. Certainly, if you look at supply chains and you look at the part of the last couple years where supply chain, for lack of a more technical term, discombobulations really wreaked havoc on our global economic dynamics, creating inflationary pressures, supply and demand mismatches, container ships and containers in the wrong places, right? We've got a lack of resilience. We have a lack of inclusivity. If you look at, I've learned this term from the business sector, the K-shaped impacts through the pandemic, the K-shaped recovery. What I understand that to mean is that not everyone's been impacted the same way by the pandemic itself or the recovery, that some have been totally flattened. Services sectors, travel and leisure, movie theaters, right, completely flattened during the pandemic. Right. And other parts of our economy that have done even better than if there had been no pandemic. Same thing true for our population. Some people on the front lines who had to take on risks that the rest of us didn't have to in order to enable the rest of us to get by. And those of us with, white collar desk jobs who were able to zoom in and out and get through relatively safely, and sometimes with even more opportunities on the backside. So that's on inclusivity. And then on the sustainability part, I think this is where actually the business sector is even further ahead than those of us in government, recognizing that in order to continue to be able to produce for your shareholders, to continue to employ your employees, to continue to bring and keep your communities together where you are producing, where you are providing services, we need to have a long runway ahead of us in terms of our planet, our people, our political systems. And right now, at the pace and the rate we're going with the incentive structures that we have, that runway looks shorter and shorter every year that goes by.
Can I ask you a personal question, about how you inculcate these messages and themes across an administration? I just read this speech, and Rana Foroohar of the Financial Times just applauded the heck out of it. I mean, I've rarely seen a U.S. trade representative get so much applause, right, in this. Ed Luce, her colleague, didn't like it as much, but you're kind of out there looking at, and you reframe trade in very unique ways. In fact, and you talk about it's time to help build the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. And there are a lot of frames you brought to this, which I found very novel and unique, which is strange, for me, in a conversation that's been going on for a long time. Do you have show and tell in the Biden administration? Do you kind of bring everybody, have like a teach-in where you can kind of get how do you share the views you have? And I should also add, Representative Darren LaHood, who last time I checked was a Republican, I interviewed him recently, had great things to say about you, which is also an unusual moment. So how do you help the messages that you are trying to sort of develop as America's trade policy become shared around administration? Because I don't know how it works.
Okay. So, Steve, what I would start with is that they're not my messages. I happen to be out there. They're my messages in the fact that I am out there helping to talk about this and articulate it and try to put it into the conversation. But lots and lots of us who plug into the economy, whether through policymaking, legislating, reporting, operating, actively participating, that I think that there is a realization that all of us are coming to, that we need new ideas, we need new ways of doing things to get at the types of outcomes that I think we've always been looking for, which is, and I take some inspiration from the WTO, the founding documents, the agreement that created the WTO in 1994-95. When you look at that intro, and it still is very inspirational, it talks about the goals of creating this multilateral trading system, which were not to facilitate more trade for the sake of more trade. The goals that we were aiming at were to raise living standards, to try to create full employment, to ensure the sustainability of the use of our natural resources. A lot of what we're doing is trying to get back to those fundamentals, because I think at the end of the day, the part that is the real no-brainer is we want to expand out the opportunity for people to live good lives. And I think on that, in terms of the conversation across the administration, I give the president and my colleagues in the administration, and also I want to say the partners in Congress and also in our economy, a lot of credit for recognizing that there are things that we need to do now, and that we have an opportunity now to set ourselves up for a brighter, better future.
So to that end, do you think that looking back in hindsight at your predecessor, Bob Lighthizer,'s efforts to renegotiate NAFTA into the USMCA, I remember running into Lighthizer and the late Richard Trumka at Cafe Milano one night having, Cabernet and cigars, celebrating their achievement. Was that a good renegotiation? Is that a model for how, getting some of these other equities right, climate, various environmental issues, labor standards, but I think is that the model that you think is a constructive one?
I think that it is a model and is an important foundation for the work that we are doing now and the work ahead of us. There are innovative elements in that renegotiation of the NAFTA. Why did we renegotiate the NAFTA? Well, I think that largely there were two reasons. One was, and overall was to make it better, right? One was to modernize it. The NAFTA dates back to the 1990s. Right. It was now the late 2010s, 2017, I think, is when that effort kicked off. So modernize it to reflect the global economy. We've got digitization, et cetera. Okay, great. The other part of it, though, was to fix something, to remediate elements of what we had seen in the 25 years of NAFTA. Mm-hmm. And because of those two forces coming together, you have novel elements of the NAFTA. And let me just focus on, I get a lot of questions about, well, you say you're advancing a worker-centered trade policy. What does that mean? No one's ever talked about trade policy in that way before. The Biden administration, President Biden said that we are going to advance a worker-centered trade policy. One of our touchstones and one of our concrete examples is look at that renegotiation of the NAFTA. A very, very long-term criticism of the NAFTA was that it was not good for workers. It was not good for our workers. It was not good for Mexico's workers or Canada's workers, because workers in Mexico did not have the opportunity really to advocate for themselves and to better their conditions, that there has been, there would be and there has been a downward pressure on our workers' bargaining power and their ability to improve their livelihoods as their productivity improves. So what happened in the renegotiation of the NAFTA and then the USMCA? It's a long story. One day I will tell all of you all of the more colorful parts of that story. But for today...
Want to do it at Cafe Milano? Drink some cigars?
I don't smoke cigars, but Cabernet definitely.
I don't either. But
okay. What we have done building on this is one specific innovation, the labor-specific rapid response mechanism allows anyone to petition one of the governments to say, I have credible evidence that there is a facility in Mexico that is not abiding by Mexican law or the rules of the USMCA, and workers are not being afforded the right to collectively bargain or the freedom of association.
Right.
We have used this mechanism now 7 times. And in each of the situations where we have advanced through to the end of the mechanism, we have facilitated the opportunity and allowed for workers in Mexico to vote for a collective bargaining agreement that they have seen before they voted, that they agree represents their interests, to secure higher wages and or better benefits. And so what I want everybody to realize is, for the first time in our history, maybe for the first time in history, we are offering workers through a trade agreement. This mechanism wouldn't exist but for the trade agreement. We are offering them a trade mechanism to improve their livelihoods. And that turns the criticism of the NAFTA on its head.
Right.
That trade agreements are only there to deplete and erode the opportunities of workers and pitting them against each other in global competition. And that is a guiding principle for us. We will have to adapt it and tailor it to our different partnerships, to different situations and regions and different contexts. But the inspiration there is that the winners and the people whose interests we're carrying in our trade agreement negotiations are not just the biggest of the big. that we bring it all the way down to the mediums, the smalls, and the people and our workers. And the environment obviously is a big part of this because we all need, again, that runway to have a future.
Look, we only have a few minutes, and I want to do a lightning round here. But when I read your speech, this extraordinary speech, it almost sounded as if you were trying to come out with a new version of trade and our equities and concerns that would make Americans trust trade more. Are Americans trusting trade more?
I think that every single day I am out there pounding the sand, whether that is traveling the world, whether that is traveling around the world or traveling the United States, to make the case that we are here to rebuild trust, not just in trade, but that trade is here to reinforce all of the economic policies that this administration is focused on building that economy from the bottom up and the middle out. And that is all about our people.
Later, I'm interviewing the senior minister of Singapore, and if I were to ask him, do you like the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework or do you like TPP, which better? I think he's going to say TPP. Is the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework accomplishing anything that TPP would have? Is it inching that direction? What do you think the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework needs to yet do to broaden our trade and economic footprint in that region?
I think the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework needs to be responsive to the challenges and the opportunities we are facing today, which are different from the ones, or different from our understanding of where we were going as an economy 5 and 7 years ago. So, and this is where this vision that we have in terms of how to recalibrate our approach to trade and economic engagement with the rest of the world to promote and to achieve better outcomes. We can't do that by ourselves. Just the nature of trade, right? It involves at least two parties. We need the partnership from the rest of the world, from our own economy and participants in our economy, from the Congress, from across the administration. We need that partnership to come up with the affirmative vision. If we all agree that, and this is consistently what I hear from my counterparts around the world, and certainly in the Indo-Pacific, we are all working through a period where we're searching for the path to an economic recovery that is promoting resilience, sustainability, and inclusiveness. If you feel like those are the things that you want to accomplish, then please come to the table and help us scope out and help us innovate how we use existing tools in new ways, how we develop new tools to try to advance these goals. And I will say that in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, certainly, if you look at how we have scoped out the entire exercise across the 4 pillars, and then if you look at how we've scoped out the trade pillar in particular, every single element in there is in there because it has answered the question, does it promote resilience, sustainability, or inclusivity? And if it doesn't, or if we haven't figured out how to connect those dots yet, it is not in there. So I think to our partners in that engagement, right, if you feel like there's something more that's not captured, come to the table with the ideas. But I would say that those ideas are going to need to respond to the challenges and opportunities we face today, and clinging to the things that we have done in the past. There's really no reason why we should imagine that doing the things that we have always done will lead to different or better outcomes. And I think that that is at the central core of our call to all of our partners to meet us in this reality.
2 more quickies. Does this form of trade effort, reorganization in the world need the WTO anymore?
Absolutely. In fact,
you're still pro-WTO.
I don't know if you missed this news, but yesterday I submitted to Dr. Ngozi, the Director General of the WTO, our instrument of acceptance, certifying that we have signed up for the WTO Fishery Subsidies Agreement.
Okay.
Now, we are the 4th country to do so, so we are early on. We wanted to set by example.
So you almost broke news here this morning. You did this yesterday.
We did this yesterday, but I'm breaking it to you now. Yes, and go look for our statement. But it is an affirmative embrace of the WTO and what it can do. This is the first WTO agreement that has as its core environmental sustainability.
Great. And I'm going to tell my team they better be handing me a package of materials here in a minute when we make the transition. This is a long day. But I want to also say just in thanks, you were here on this stage when we had our U.S.-Africa Summit, interviewed by Yinka Adegoke. We were focused on Africa then. But one of the themes that we're looking at, among many in today's forum, is the developing world, the global South and what's going on. How are you, I was very impressed with your proactive agenda with Africa that you were laying out at the time. But as you look at the trade tracks we have set aside, where does the developing world fit in?
Yes, I think that there's a powerful piece of what we're working towards that also is looking at how do we get better outcomes from our in particular, because I'm the trade rep, our trade and development policies. Our foundational programs are there. They're doing something, but they're not able to drive the kinds of what I'm hearing from my African partners. They're looking for opportunities to industrialize. It is essentially, I think, another way of saying they're looking for economic development. Some of them have gone through a deindustrialization. Some of them have experienced what some call a premature deindustrialization in the last couple decades. We ourselves have gone through a period of deindustrialization. I think that there is a lot for us to think about. And I would say there are a lot of opportunities that we have before us, and I'd love to come back and talk about them with you as we continue to work through them in our own system and with our partners. What kind of partnership can we offer countries that are developing economically that gives them the real opportunity, and let's come back to supply chains, to participate in supply chains, not just upstream, not just stuck producing the low value stuff, but where we can demonstrate real partnership in the creation of the links in the chain, where we are giving our developing country partners the opportunity to have and to own links that are higher up in that chain so that you can have a real partnership. And I think that is at the core also of our vision for a new version of globalization that improves on the previous versions we've lived through.
So Adam Hodge over there, you heard her say she wants to come back and talk some more. This guy controls the schedule. So, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Katherine Tai, U.S. Trade Representative, thank you so much. Good to see you. Thank you.